Friends, we are today continuing on the third gift that the Jewish people gave the world. And today we're in the portion of Lech Lecha, and we're talking about that third gift called freedom of choice. A little child is a little child standing next to the river, and he's gazing into the river and the reflection of the moon, Nena, or Sin, as it was called 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. And he's gazing at the reflection of the moon in the river, and that moon represents the god Nena, or Sin, and he's throwing a rock inside the river, and the ripples of the river make the moon disappear. And he throws another rock, and the moon disappears from the reflection in the river. A big dark cloud comes and covers the moon. And that little child is wondering, is this our great God that my father is telling me about? The God of the moon? And he starts wandering off. Is the moon really the God, or the sun, as it is a God in other cities? Or maybe more Dok, who's the God of all gods? And he starts to ponder, and he starts to wonder, who are these gods that my father tells me control our lives and give us our destiny and determine our fate? And he wonders. That child is only 3 years old. Many years have passed, and he takes a voyage into understanding more about these gods, and you understand that these gods cannot bring redemption to the person or to the world. His father owns a shop of idols representing those gods, and in one swift moment he destroys that shop and destroys the idols. And now, when he's 40 years old, he comes to the realization that these gods do not represent any powers. And he starts on a voyage of objecting to the way that his father told him. The ruler of that time is Nimrod. He's the all-power and almighty ruler that in the future his wife, Ashtoreth, will make him into the god of all gods after his death. And this child is growing up, and after wondering about all these gods, and after becoming a man, is rejecting all that philosophy, and he wanders off and hears the voice of the Almighty God. I am the God, your Lord, and you should serve me, not any other God. And that child that grows up to be a man understands that the most fundamental truth lies ahead of him, and that it's not about just one God monotheism, but it's something that bothered him throughout his life, and that is the determinism that comes with these gods. How these gods determine his life, and he has no way to unbind himself from these shackles of determinism. And with monotheism comes freedom of choice, something he did not have. You know who I'm talking about. That child grows up to be the most powerful and influential individual that ever roamed the earth. Today, more than 2.4 billion Christians claim that he is their father, and 1.6 billion Muslims claim that he is their spiritual and genetical father. Abraham was not a warrior, did not perform miracles, did not command any armies, but he's still the most influential man that ever lived. He is the one that brought freedom of choice to humanity and to individuals. And God, after he discovers this great revelation about being free from determined life under the moon and under the sun and under the horoscope, he starts his voyage, Lech Lecha. And without God tells him something very unique. You know how powerful freedom of choice is? Freedom of choice can actually take you out from your house that you grew in, from the house of your father. There's an influence that you had in the house of your father and your mother. You can be freed from that. You can be freed from society, because society always has an influence on an individual. It's about nurture, how you're nurtured in your society. But you know what? God says to Abraham, Lech Lecha, you shall go, mimoladetecha, from how you were born. You can be freed even from nature. That's how powerful freedom of choice is. Don't claim that if you were born disabled or with a certain race or a certain color, then your life is predetermined. No, your life is free. There is freedom of choice. Nothing is written in the stars. You are above the stars. Go out of your tent and look at the stars and be above them. Because nothing determines your life except for yourself. And that's the true freedom of choice. Therefore, Lech Lecha, you shall go from moladetecha, from your nature, and from your land, and from the house of your father. And then Abraham starts with a series of 10 tests. Each test heightens his level of freedom of choice. And we won't go into all the tests that he goes through. But the last one, the first one obviously is being thrown into the furnace of fire and of going out of the land, Lech Lecha. But the last one, the ultimate test, was the test of the sacrifice of Isaac. And here God comes with the ultimate challenge to Abraham, teaching him what freedom and choice really is. It's not only about the individual. Because you leave it up to the individual, he builds himself a whole system of belief and culture and religion. But he does it for himself, and therefore he's bound to that system. God tells him, you can be freed even from the system you create for yourself. And that is, for 100 years, Abraham comes and tells everyone, do not sacrifice children. It's against God. And he creates himself a whole system of belief. God tells him, you know what freedom of choice really is? Freeing yourself and from the systems that you build, and worshiping God and adhering to God, connecting yourself to the Almighty who invented and brought to the world freedom of choice is the only way to get freedom of choice. And therefore, go sacrifice your child. Obviously, he does not sacrifice him in the end, but go. And you're not sacrificing really your child, because in Mesopotamia 4,000 years ago, sacrifice of children wasn't the norm. So that wasn't the great difficulty upon Abraham. The great difficulty upon Abraham is to relinquish his grasp of the religion and the way that he taught everyone. And when you throw that system aside and you connect to the being and to the entity that gave you freedom of choice, that's how you are free from your endeavors, from your wantings, from your ego. So we learned today that the third gift that Jews gave the world is the concept of ultimate freedom of choice. And today, in this day and age, most people are not free. Some people think that nature is the one that's going to determine if they're successful or not. Some people think that their family or the culture that they grew in is going to determine if they're successful or not. Some individual thought that the system that they grew into and established for themselves predetermines their fate. Judaism comes and says you can unbind yourself from these shackles at any single given moment. That's how powerful freedom of choice is. And from 4,000 years ago, when everybody worshipped idols and everybody's fate was self-determined or predetermined, there's a voice, an echo. The Bible comes and tells us, and Judaism comes and tells us, you shall be free, you can be free. If you connect to God, and if you adhere to what He has to say, therefore you shall be free. This is the third gift that Judaism brings to the world, the ultimate understanding of what freedom of choice really is. And we'll end with a small story. Barry Schwartz, in his book, The Paradox of Choice, investigates how choices in the 21st century have influence on us. He says today there's an abundance of choices. Person goes to a restaurant, he wants to order a hamburger, he has more than 25 choices. Do you want it with a bun, without a bun, with ketchup, without ketchup? Many, many choices. And those choices actually paralyze a person. Go to any store and try to buy a jeans or try to buy any consumer item. You are flooded with choices, and those choices, he claims, Barry Schwartz, they paralyze the individual. So you need to limit the choices. You need to work within a framework. That's what I do with my kids. I don't bring them into a candy shop and tell them, you have 700 choices of candy, there will be flabbergasted, there will be paralyzed. You limit the choices. The father limits the choices and says, you have a choice between 3 things, A, B, and C. And therefore, you can exercise the freedom of choice more freely. Same thing for God. In the last episode of the binding of Isaac, he tells him, if you walk with me, I will limit your freedom of choice in order for you to be more free. Today, in the 21st century, limitation of freedom of choice by adhering to God is even more crucial in order for us to exercise more freely our freedom of choice. Third gift that the Jews gave to the world. Freedom of choice.